Hey y'all, welcome back. Today we're checking out how a village was swept into the sea. This might be sad, I don't know.
This is the village of Boscastle in Cornwall, England. And the families that live here have called it home for generations. It was once famous for its picturesque harbour, attracting thousands of people each year. But on the 16th of August 2004, that all changed.
And all of a sudden these huge raindrops started covering the windscreen.
A procession of cars cascading down the flooded streets.
Dozens of people trapped.
And it got worse and worse and worse.
Cars and homes are washed away. A number are reported missing.
Wow.
It really was the perfect storm.
I remember seeing those clouds. I wasn't in Boscastle, but nearby on a family holiday, watching the news in disbelief. This flash flood was reported across the world, and then once the media had had enough, Boscastle faded from the headlines. So we're going to look at how all this unfolded. I've been given access to local archives, and I'm making the trip to Boscastle to spend time with residents and search and rescue personnel, to understand the village's unique geography and climate, to show you how one storm destroyed a community and what happened in the aftermath to try and save it.
Wow, just from looking at these videos so far and the photos, it looks like it's in the perfect spot for a flash flood. You know, it's in a canyon or a valley.
These news clips are all that I know of Boscastle, and at the time my 11-year-old brain just couldn't comprehend how this could physically happen. But I guess lucky for me, 20 years on, I have a YouTube channel that this is kind of our wheelhouse, and I can just make it my job to figure it out. But I want to hear from experts and locals with the benefit of hindsight. So I'm going to take a road trip with my photographer friend Kira down to Cornwall, which happens to also be one of the most beautiful parts of England. Okay, I've just arrived in Boscastle to show you guys really how this area was affected by this flood and what makes Boscastle so unique. Wow. We have to go all the way out to the coast.
So it's still standing. People still live there.
Boscastle has a local population of just 706 residents, but in the summer months it can swell into the thousands, and its geography is pretty wild. Most live here at the top of the hill, but the village extends down this steep-sided valley which leads out to the North Atlantic. Today, Boscastle survives on tourism, but in the 19th century, this harbour was the only location that boats could pull in along the north coast of Cornwall for about 40 miles, making it an important commercial port for the southwest of England.
It was at one time a very...
I want to look at it on a map. Show me on a map. Boscastle. Okay, here's the port. So most people live up here, he was saying. Yeah, it looks like it's a place where two streams come together. At least two streams, maybe more. So if it's raining around here, all that water is going to go right there. Wow.
This is Anne Knight. She and her husband Rod have lived in the village on and off for most of their life and run the Boscastle Community Archive.
If you imagine coming in there in Victorian times where the sides of the river was piled up with manure, they used to render down whale blubber. There'd be masses of coal piled up.
Heavy goods for the southwest had to travel by sea and would be unloaded here, coming down from Wales, Bristol, and even as far as Canada, France, and Spain. Over time, as the shipping industry evolved and larger ports grew in size, the need for places like Boscastle declined. But the village adapted, and there's always been a deep sense of belonging and community here.
Rod's got family in the village who have got records going back to the 1400s.
Wow.
And buildings like the Harbour Light have stood here for 400 years. Wow. And these charming paintings of the village started drawing people from across the country. By the mid-20th century, the village had become a popular destination for tourists. Looking at this map of Boscastle, you can see at the bottom of the valley there is a point where these two rivers meet, the River Jordan and the River Valency. And it's these rivers, plus Cornwall's unusual climate, that we need to look at to understand how Boscastle turned from a charming little village into this.
It makes sense when
Maybe
you
you
got
can
two big
now
rivers
see
like that.
why Boscastle is such a unique bay. It's tucked away, there's these rivers that are streaming down from the valleys, and Cornwall has its own microclimate. Now, do I understand microclimates properly? No, I don't. Do I know somebody that does? Yes, I do.
It's a very unusual place. It's sticking out into the middle of the sea because you've got sea on both sides that is controlling what's going on in Cornwall.
This creates what is known as a convergence zone, where warm, moist air from the Atlantic clashes with cooler air over land, creating localized weather patterns or microclimates. So you can often find sunshine on one side of the hill and heavy rain on the other. And that's what we saw on the day of the flood in 2004. I'm here in Port Isaac, just down the road is Boscastle, and here is the lifeboats that were first launched, and I'm here to meet Damien, who was there on that day.
It was a day very similar to how it is today, and my pager went off. Brief to me was that there was mass stranding and significant flooding at Boscastle. But as soon as we left the harbour and started making our way up to the east, it was very obvious that there was some sort of weather front hanging over Boscastle. The closer we got, the more atmospheric it was. The cloud base was a lot lower, the light was diminished, and then all of a sudden one of the helicopters from Coldrose came over the top of us at about 50 feet, and as it bared to its starboard to go into the harbour, it came straight over the radio.
Caution, caution, Port Isaac on your entrance to the harbour. There's debris.
Ooh. Oh my god.
Like in Port Isaac, the weather in Boscastle has started like a perfect summer's day, at the height of the tourist season, with estimates of around 1,000 people visiting the village.
Oh no.
But around this time, the weather is starting to change. Rod was a postman and was telling us how he had just finished his shift for that day.
Got back to Camelford, sweltering hot, and I got about halfway back, and all of a sudden these huge great raindrops started covering the windscreen. And out over here in the dunes was this huge, great, dark, black cloud.
Coastal winds from both sides of the Cornish Peninsula converged over Boscastle.
And when those two winds meet, there's only one place they can go, and that's upwards.
These black clouds shot up to 40,000 feet.
Got back here, parked up. I put my waterproof coat on and it got drenched. I got drenched inside and out, okay? It was that heavy.
This torrential rain showed no sign of stopping.
And my neighbour across the road at the time was Sue, and she was looking out of her bedroom window because the rain was beginning to fill the storm drains out there. And then she looked down from her bedroom window and she could see water at her front door. I think I better go down, she said, and put a towel behind the front door.
At least.
And it got worse and worse and worse. It was actually quite terrifying.
Yeah, I bet.
Anne and Rod live at the top of the village and know that the worst is yet to come for those at the bottom of the valley.
Coming down from the top, it was bringing a load of rubbish down with it. And we did actually have a half-grown tree come down.
Wow. And down there, the situation is getting much worse. The two rivers have converged.
The river started rising at quite a horrendous rate.
At 3:45 p.m, the river bursts its bank, and people are struggling to get through the water.
It just changed into something that's terrifying.
It's like a
can't
rapid.
imagine that's the same river in the same place, but of course it is.
At the top of the village, the river has overwhelmed the car park. Cars are swept away towards the village, where locals and tourists are trying to escape to higher ground. By 4 p.m, it's been continuously raining for 4 hours. And with the rising tide in the harbour, Boscastle is engulfed on all sides.
Oh my god, it's tearing down buildings.
There's a flood here, really bad flood here, and people are getting injured. And we need some emergency services down here.
Emergency services have been alerted and are en route, as well as the media, who begin reporting on the unfolding events.
A massive rescue operation is underway as a flash flood deluges a Cornish village.
A flood of water, which is almost unimaginable, has ripped its way through the centre of this village.
At 4:35 p.m, the first rescue...
That, you know, it seems like this would have happened before, at some point. People have lived there for so long, and the reason for it happening is all natural, I think. It just seems like it would have happened before that, I'm not finding anything about that. But it must have happened before, at some point, right?
At 4:35 p.m, the first rescue helicopter arrives on the scene to find people stranded as the flood consumes the village and a major incident is declared.
It's going through the building.
On land, they have created a perimeter and moved people up the hill away from the danger. At 4:55 p.m, the RNLI lifeboat from Port Isaac, led by Damien and 2 other crew members, arrive at the entrance to the harbour.
Visually, what we were seeing...
Sorry, what's the RNLI? I don't know what that is. RNLI, is it like the Coast Guard? Royal National Lifeboat Institution. Cool.
Was completely abnormal. The noises, the lightning, the hail hitting our helmets, the cars crunching up against the cliffs. Couldn't smell the sea. It was all oil and fuel. It was so overwhelming. It was one of those mind-blowing moments. So we came in here, and then we got to here. The helicopter was here. Yeah. And then...
Is that actual footage?
10 seconds later, Volkswagen Passat with a caravan on the back came around the corner.
And it's not just vehicles. Basically, anything you can imagine being stored in people's gardens is coming towards them.
Oh my God.
We were planning to come into the harbour and do all sorts, but we had no concept of what was going on. We spent all of our time searching the cars, and then we would sink them about there. So we'd smash the windows, get them sunk, get them out
That's
the
good
way.
strategy, actually, because there might be
Meanwhile,
people
in the village, it's a race against time for the rescue teams to try and get those who are stranded in buildings, on rooftops.
In the end, I just clung to this drain pipe because that was all I could do, and screamed.
Nightmare.
I knew the only way I was going to go, if someone didn't get me, was into the sea.
All the debris is
Terrifying.
getting stuck between the bridges and buildings until the pressure becomes too much, and like a dam breaking, it sends a chain reaction downstream as the momentum of the water picks up, causing a 10-foot wave to rip through Boscastle.
We could see buildings
so
crumbling
fast.
around us.
The 400-year-old harbour-like building has water gushing through it. And all of a sudden,
it just crumbled like a pack of cards.
At 5:10 p.m, the pilot of the rescue helicopter sends out this report. Soon after, there are
Could have made that
rescue
call a little
helicopters
earlier,
in
maybe.
a flight pattern over Boscastle,
There's only room for 1 aircraft in at a time.
taking turns to descend into the village to rescue people.
It's
There's
the
only room
largest
for one.
airborne search and rescue entity in peacetime.
We are measuring
Wow.
in dozens the number
The
of
largest...
people
Wait, he said the largest airborne search and rescue entity in peacetime. All for this little town.
In peacetime.
we are measuring in dozens the number of people we've had to rescue. People trapped in trees, people trapped in cars, 2 adults and the baby we managed to save.
Oh my God.
One of my
How do you have a
friends, Jane,
baby on
she
it?
lives in a house behind the big lawn. Her husband was very ill. He did have to be lifted out by helicopter.
By 8 p.m, over 100 people have been winched to safety. The storm has passed and the water is starting to recede. The reports that came out afterwards stated that over 5 hours, 8 inches of rain fell over Boscastle. To put that into perspective, 8 inches is nearly 3 times the average monthly rainfall for the UK.
But it was quite a wet summer, so those fields.
What's that stat again? 8 inches is 3 times the average monthly rainfall for the whole UK.
Average monthly rainfall for the UK.
But it was quite a wet summer, so those fields above Boscastle were very wet already.
And the rivers have been neglected. They were clogged up and the vegetation was overgrown, which acted essentially as a barrier, causing the floodwaters to back up and increase in pressure until it broke, causing a chain reaction down the valley, increasing in speed and force. When the flood hit the village, we saw that amplified, with cars and other debris getting stuck under these bridges.
This was like one of the sticking points. Okay, imagine like a lock, right? Holding back water
This kind of acted as the final lock. This bridge was not like this, it was an old stone bridge. At some point the water got over that and these cars were swept away, which then led to a wave that was about 10 foot that swept out into the bay. Actually being down here, looking up into the valley where the water was coming from, is frightening. But despite one of the most severe flash floods in the country's history, remarkably, there were no fatalities and just 8 minor injuries reported.
What?
Really, I think we're very, very lucky nobody was killed in this
Wow.
event. People
Yeah,
do
oh
die
my
in these
God.
types of flash flood events all the time, and often because it's so fast.
In the immediate aftermath, people were taken to a leisure centre for shelter, while emergency services began searching through the wreckage, ensuring everybody was accounted for and assessing the safety
That's a
of the
miracle.
remaining buildings.
That's crazy.
58 properties were flooded, 4 were destroyed, and around 150 vehicles were swept out into the harbour. Other nearby villages, including Crackington Haven, were also affected by floods.
Instantly, the next day, everyone was down there offering help.
Jane's house was completely trashed. It had mud 2 foot deep in it.
How did you
And I
come back
went
from that?
down probably for several weeks to help out.
Shoveling mud. Oh,
mud out,
God.
rescue all
What
her
a mess.
treasures and things that were lying in the mud.
The work to restore Boscastle took place in the down season between October and May. Estimates put the cost of damage and loss of income at £50 million. By 2005, most shops and restaurants had reopened. The harbour light that had been swept away was rebuilt, and flood defences in the village were improved, and part of that effort involved deepening the river.
That's
Looking
smart.
at it now, this beautiful, quaint little village, you wouldn't have known what had happened all that time ago.
That is wild.
20 years on, there's no signs or plaques pointing to what happened on that day, and I get the sense that locals would rather keep it that way.
Yeah.
But I was told if I visited the Cobweb Inn on a Friday afternoon, I'd find people who were up for talking about it and what it's been like since. So I guess I'm gonna go and drink and try and speak to some people.
Do it.
Auntie lives here, so she walks around and told that we're here to visit her.
Oh, okay. So she's told you about it?
Yeah.
I don't remember anything.
You and your husband run this pub? And what do you remember about that day?
I had to go to a midwife appointment in Camelford, and they told me you're not going to be able to get back. We had a lot of water in there. We had we're built for flood. The older buildings here, we always flood.
So there's a history of flooding in Boscastle.
But not like this.
In 2004, nothing like this had
There's
been
been a
so
history of
well
flooding.
documented, at least in the UK. But as I found out, Boscastle is prone to flooding.
But then you look at those steep-sided valleys and you can see
Yeah.
that has been carved out of the landscape by a rushing, raging river. And we know that there were floods in the late 1800s and
Okay.
early 1900s too. It has flooded before.
Flash floods along this coastline are not unique. In fact, 52 years to the day of the Boscastle flood, the village of Lynmouth in Devon was hit in the night, which devastated buildings and killed 34 people.
Oh my God.
Experts said that the 2004 flood was the kind of event that you'd expect to happen once every 400 years. Hannah explained to me that while the risks are rare, advancements in forecasting and flood risk zoning are helping communities prepare. While there are now better plans and structures in place to manage floods, flash floods can still be very difficult to control.
But of course, in these catchments, they tend to just smash through everything because the water is more powerful than these huge concrete walls.
Amazing.
So 20 years on, my adult brain has finally been able to piece it all together. Walking around here listening to accounts from the people who have lived it has answered those questions in a way that I couldn't get from just reading about it. And I also wondered what happened after the media left. Like, how did Boscastle move on?
I think it was the Sunday after the flood. I had to go to hospital. I had her 11 days later. Pub opened 12 days later.
She was
to get the
pregnant?
baby's head. Stayed open ever since.
Oh my God.
Wow.
Tourism quickly returned to Boscastle. And like a lot of these idyllic coastal towns, it comes with mixed feelings. What is it like today?
It's a little bit lonely in a way. We have different neighbours used to be every week, but with Airbnb it would be almost every day.
It's got a thriving business there again now. The shops are open, they're vibrant, they're back to former glory.
So what's it like now in Boscastle?
Busy.
Yeah.
Different. A lot of people that were here when the flood was here aren't here anymore. A lot of people have gone. There's only a handful of us left now. A lot of them, I think, had had enough. But I mean, older people.
That makes sense.
People go. Just how it happens, I suppose, really.
And for me, I guess I no longer picture Boscastle as this deluged village, but instead a place kind of like no other, tucked away in this steep Cornish valley that has a surprising amount of history that stretches further back than one fateful day in 2004.
Wow. That is wild. Nobody died. No fatalities. That's amazing. When you see these cars in a river, no one died? 2004, there was that huge tsunami in Japan, wasn't there? Boxing Day 2004.
Colors.
Wo gar nicht.
Oh.
Very bad state.
Put me there.
It
was impossible.
Okay. We don't want to watch that. Much different story. Oh man, I think it's pretty smart of them to dig that stream a little deeper. Looking for some kind of documentation of how they dug it. How do you dig a stream deeper when there's water going through it? If any of y'all watching lived through that, kudos to you. Be thankful for your people, y'all. I'm thankful for y'all. That sounded shallow, but I mean it. Well, thank y'all for watching this with me, and I'll see you next time. Later.